Bite my shiny metal.
Guys, it's BT here, and this is the keyboard formerly known as the Omnitype Bauer. It is now called the Omnitype Bauer. This keyboard has been featured all over. Linus made one, Teja just did one for Dave 2D. It's everywhere and with good reason. So if I can compare this custom keyboard to another manufacturer in the tech space, it would be Apple. It's very well thought out from the packaging to the building, and it does the basics better than anybody else. This is the keyboard that really made me fall in love with isolation mount or gasket mount because it introduced me to a new, richer sound that I never knew could be produced by a keyboard. I also sat down with the creator of the keyboard, Garret from Omnitype, so he could walk us through some of the design choices of this keyboard. I've learned a lot from him, so I figured this would be a great chance for you guys to gain some knowledge as well. But first things first, let's talk about this keyboard. Now, looking at the package, it's even shaped like the backside of the keyboard with the little lip there. It's the little things. The manual to build this is like nothing else that I've seen in the custom space. Usually you just get a board, you get some screws, and you kind of just have to figure it out. With Omnitype, they actually made a manual to build this keyboard, and it's really, really good, and it looks visually stunning. It has a split backspace with no window keys. This took me a little time to get used to, I'm not gonna lie, but aesthetics wise, it makes the keyboard look more symmetrical, which is very pleasing to the eye. He made each blocker on each side the same exact side, whereas on other 65% keyboards, the blocker on the right side is slightly smaller, so this gives it the illusion of symmetry. The case is a thick boy with 3 C's this time. The bezels are thick, making this keyboard have a very big footprint. I personally like thinner bezels, but this gives my collection some variety. The weight of this keyboard is actually insane, and you start to realize why once you flip over this keyboard. As you see, the entire bottom is made out of this brass weight. There's not a weight in the middle of the keyboard. The entire bottom is brass, giving it a solid feel like no other keyboard on the market. Needless to say, this is just not moving on your desk. And then you've got these 2 nice flanking keyboard feet on the bottom here, adding even more stability while you're typing. Another reason why I say this is like if Apple made a keyboard or a custom keyboard is that the keyboard is built with just 11 screws. 7 on the bottom and 4 for the dotted board inside the keyboard for the USB-C. It's one of the easiest keyboards I've done to date, very easy. This is due to the isolation mount. You don't have to screw the plate into any of the cases. It just sandwiches in between the top and the bottom case, keeping the plate in place. Using some neoprene strips all around the inside of the top and bottom casing. This was my first time with this mount way back in early 2020, and I fell in love with the ease of building a gasket mount keyboard, as well as the cushioned bottom out feel of the typing experience and the more muted sound that comes from it, since there's no metal on metal action or screws touching and rattling like you would have on other mounts. The plate material I went with was the polycarbonate, another first for me at the time, and wow, the thought that is produced by this kind of plate material is second to none. I now order all of my keyboards with polycarbonate because of this keyboard. I recommend this to those of you guys out there that like deeper sounding keyboards like myself. The PCB is by Wilbur, so you're getting a top tier PCB as well. It's white, which looks pretty cool, and it works with the VIA software if you do want to configure the keyboard, which is amazing because I hated flashing layouts in QMK. Like I said, plug and play with this keyboard, very easy to build, very easy to set up to get it exactly how you want your keyboard. This is a solder only keyboard. Sorry, hot swap hose, that's what I'm calling you guys, hashtag hot swap hose, because you guys like to mess with all types of switches. Shaking my head. Why don't you want to settle down? Just commit to one switch, like the Novelkeys creams, which I used in this keyboard. I'll admit they weren't my favorite switch when I first got them. They needed a lot of love to get them to act right. You have to break them in for a few weeks without lube to smooth them out, since it's palm on palm. At first, they are scratchy as fuck, but over the weeks, they start to feel and sound amazing. This can only be achieved by using them beforehand in like a hot swap board and then going at it for a long time, do a bunch of typing tests, taking them out, lube them. And I used a thicker lube on these, a Krytox 205 grade 0 lube, and it was like a whole new world once I put them into this board. Now they are really good all around switch with a 55 gram actuation and 70 gram bottom out. The total travel distance is 4 and the actuation travel distance is 2 millimeters. I found that the cream housing is really tight with minimal wobble, so filming wasn't necessary. The stabilizers I went with were the Durox stabs, lubed with some Krytox 205 grade 0 lube as well. Next, we had to go all Omnitype on this board and use the boob set or the 8008 set. This is based off of a bra. I see what you did there. Love the gray, the hot pink look of this set, and I used the Bender Artisan keycap from Polykeys that matched perfectly with the gray of this set. We also have the Space Cables 8008 cable to go along and match up with this setup. Then we're rocking that new 8008 desk mat. The whole setup just looks sick. All right guys, let's drop that sound test so you can hear what this delicious keyboard sounds like. Oh yeah. All right, so I'm gonna bring in Garret to educate us on his board and talk a little bit about the design choices that he went with this board and some upcoming changes for the round 2 of the Bauer. And you also want to pay attention to this interview because he actually releases some classified information during this interview. So sit back and enjoy. All right, please welcome our guest, Garret from Omnitype, to the video. He's gonna be breaking down the Bauer round 2 and give us the lowdown and some exclusives on some of the drops coming up that they have. So Garret, please tell us what you do, who you are, for the people that don't know you, who've been living under a rock.
All right, well, I am Garret. I'm from Alabama, so might be under a rock to most people. But I used to be a graphic designer, started my own business kind of on accident, and 3 or almost 4 years later now, we are where we are. So we sell custom keycap sets, custom mechanical keyboards, desk pads, and hopefully into the future, more exciting things.
All right, now since this is the Bauer video, we're talking about the Bauer today. I was curious, how did the Bauer even come to be, and why did you choose some of the design choices for this keyboard?
There was no particular reason why it exists besides that I designed the keyboard that I wanted. It was just inevitable that we sold keycap sets for, I think, a year before I started trying to design a keyboard, and it was just designing a keyboard that I wanted. The layout I wanted, the aesthetic, small changes in the layout that I wanted, and just something that took a little bit of the things that I liked in boards that I owned, and different attributes, and starting from there, and then putting my own, I guess you would say, flair or style or uniqueness to the design to it, which is where you see the arches, which was a huge thing that once I sketched that up, I was like, wow, this is gonna be a really cool opportunity where you can see both colors at the same time, but it doesn't have a seam, which is where this is purposeful dual coloring, however you want to say that. I really liked that opportunity once I got it, and I just went from there. There's no reason why anything that we sell exists, so besides to bring joy to your eyeballs, you know.
Now, you told me before about the blockers for the 65%. Can you go into like detail and like let them know like your thought process behind that?
Yeah, actually before I designed the Bauer, I had never had a 65% board with blockers. I had TKLs, but I just didn't like the way that it was done at the time, which was a 1U blocker on the left and a 0.5U blocker on the right. I was playing around in Keyboard Layout Editor, and I was like, why are these not the same size? I was like, 1 plus 0.5 is 1.5, so why would you not just put 2 0.75s instead of like breaking it up in uneven amounts? And then once I did it, I was like, oh, this actually works with the key sizes, which is kind of hard sometimes when you want to make a funky layout and you'll be like 0.5U short and it just doesn't work. So that was nice. And then once I saw it, I was like, okay, this is perfect. This is definitely the layout. No question about it. And it just kind of became the part that people know about, probably more than the actual arch part of the board. And a lot of people even call them Bauer blockers. It was not coined by me, but it's cool to see.
So this was my first isolation mount or gasket mounted keyboard, and I was blown away, and it actually changed what mounts I would get going forward. Like, I always look for isolation or gasket mount now because of this keyboard. What made you go with gasket mount for like the people that are like starting out with like keyboards? Maybe they don't know the difference between the mounts. Like, why an isolation mount over like a top mount or a tray mount? Why did you choose this specific mount?
I can't take credit for the existence of the idea. Like, I wasn't the first one to come up with it. I believe Keycult was the one that did it very similar to how we did it around the same time. We did it a little bit different, but for the most part, it was around the same. And I had owned basically all top mount boards up to that point. And just the idea that you can keep the part that you're constantly pressing and vibrating from butting up against other metals, which in turn is going to vibrate and all throughout the different metals. I was like, that's a cool concept. Completely isolate the part that you're touching to where all sounds don't go into the rest of the case. So I just kind of went from there. Which the original Bauer was like almost an oversimplification of what Keycult did, which is what I ended up improving on in the second one. But the overall idea is just that the plate doesn't touch. I mean, it's like if you put a metal pole up against another metal pole and hit it, it's gonna like vibrate all the way up. But if you hold it up against a pillow, it's not gonna do anything. So that was kind of the idea. I mean, I had no scientific research. I just did it because I was like, in my head, this sounds right.
You mentioned the round 2. What did you specifically change going to the round 2? And how are you dealing with the popularity of the Bauer round 2? I know you had like, what, 5,000 entries for that keyboard. It's been crazy the amount of support you've gotten for the board, or the interest you've had in the board. What changes can people expect?
Yeah, it was a lot bigger than I expected. Like, round 1 ran in, what year was it? Lost count of my years. 2019, I think. And we only sold 40, and I think we had like 800 people try to get in, and that was like mind-boggling to me. I was like, holy crap, 800 people. And then in the second one, it was like 5,000. I was like, holy crap. And we sold 320. I thought 320 was like, we're getting close to getting everyone, but I guess somehow it's exploded, even though like 40 exist. But change-wise, it was really just wanting to improve on the things that I wasn't all that happy with after I did the first round. Not to say that the first round's bad or anything, but there's always, in my mind, I can always go back to something and find something wrong with it after looking at it for so many hours that it takes to make it. And the main things that I didn't like about the first round were that the plate, as much as I didn't want it to touch, barely touched the inside of the top piece when you set it down. Like, that's kind of what like set it in place, and I was like, I don't like this because it goes against the whole reason. The foam pads still, for the most part, will absorb all of the vibrations and everything, like in theory, but I was like, it's still technically touching, so I was like, I gotta fix that. But the second thing was when you are putting the board together, because it's a compression system, the bottom isn't actually where it's going to end up before you screw it in, because you're actually pushing, you're compressing the foam together. So it takes, like, the screws are what's pushing it. So in the first round, you literally just screwed and screwed and screwed and screwed, and it would just go forever, theoretically. And you just need to know, like, when it gets tight, stop screwing, you're gonna break it, which didn't seem like a great user experience. Like, it was still fine if you stopped, but I knew that there was a possibility that some people wouldn't. And there just wasn't a guaranteed way that every board would get the same amount of compression. I changed it to where I put some pillars, as we call them, on the bottom piece that would eventually actually touch the top and insert themselves into their little grooves in the top, which 1 aligns the bottom perfectly every time, and at 2 means the bottom will stop moving. Once it hits, you're done, you stop screwing, just like any other kind of board there is. So technically, because the plate isn't actually attached to anything, there's a small variance of movement north, south, east, west that it could move. So you could put it together, and then when you like pick it up, you'll notice that like my gaps on this side are a little bit bigger than this side, and then you have to take it apart. And so I actually was trying a few different solutions to fix that. I was even like experimenting with foam strips that were like suction cuppy, like where it would stick to the top, but it wasn't actually adhesive. Like there's some magic foam that exists out there that I found that when you pressed, it would just stick. So the plate, you could align the plate, stick it in place, and then when you flipped it upside down, it wouldn't fall out. So that's what I thought I was going to do, but the plate had to be like smooth mirror finish for it to stick. So like the brass and the polycarbonate, it just didn't work. So I was like, okay, I can't just never do those plates again. And I can't have a solution that only works for part of the options. So I came up with a taco bumper thing, which basically butts up against those pillars, it makes sure the plate is perfectly in the exact same spot every single time. And it also makes sure that the plate doesn't ever touch those pillars. So it can't shift. It literally can't move. So now there's no problem with it touching anything it's not supposed to touch, and it's always going to be centered every single time you put it together with like zero effort or thought. From the outside, you literally can't tell any of those things. But
speaking of the Bauer Light, I know we kind of talked about it before. Like, what are your goals with the Bauer Light? I know that's going to be a killer keyboard coming up this year or next year, whenever it drops. Like, what are you looking at in terms of price wise? If you want to tell us, what can you tell us about maybe like some ideas you have going forward with the board?
Our plan, the entire reason for making it was to get as many people a Bauer in their hands that want one. But like the metal one, that was just going to take too long, or was like basically going to be, we couldn't keep up. As you can see, it went from 800 to 5,000 in a year, and we only went up 280. So it's like, if it continues, we're never going to catch up. So it's like, we want to do whatever the best we can do to get as many people one as possible. And with injection mold, that comes, one, the price is lower, which immediately means that you possibly double the amount of people who want it, because price was probably a huge factor in the metal ones. And then, but it also, for the metal ones. So it's like, so how many people, the only reason they didn't enter is because of the price. So it's like, but then injection mold just gives you so many opportunities to mass produce things quicker, faster, and they're cheaper to produce, obviously, so we can actually stock them, which is our plan. Our goal is to eventually just have these in stock if possible. I mean, if they sell out, we will continue to get them. It's not going to be like, oh, they're gone, next project. Like, we put so many months of work into it that it's something that we're doing in order for it to be a long-term option for people that want them. And then obviously we like to do a bunch of fun colors and special editions and all the fun stuff that you can do that injection mold brings along with it, with not as much effort and risk as a metal board does, and QC and all that time. It's been the most fun and challenging thing I've ever done.
All right, so the final question I have for you before we get out of here: what's better, linear or tactile?
So there is an actual answer to this one. I know I said earlier that there wasn't an answer, but there is an answer, and it's linear, 100%. It's like, it's in a textbook somewhere, but that's just the answer. I mean,
it's like on a scroll somewhere in like a Egyptian cave that linears are better, you know. Hieroglyphics to say linear is better.
There's some hieroglyphics about that linear is better. I mean, if you think about life, if we compare two lifelines and one has no bumps in the road and is perfectly straight all the way from start to finish, compared to one that has a bump there and back, you'd be like, why would I want to take the trip that has the bump?
All right, well, any last words from you before we get out of here, Garrett?
I don't think so. I appreciate the kind words about the Bauer, and I hope we can get Bauer 2s out to everyone whenever they come in after Chinese New Year, and hopefully get Bauer Light out to more and more and more people, and get you one to show off, you know?
All right, I hope you have enjoyed the Omnitype Bauer video. It has been your boy BT. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.